welcome everyone to the dental water cooler session for this month, June. Thank you for indulging me a week later due to my travel arrangements last week, where I was meant to be on a plane, but those arrangements were changed at the last minute. But anyway, thank you for making it this week. The dental water cooler for the ultimate patient experience is on the second Monday evening of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And today we'll be talking about how your use of technology in your dental practice could be inadvertently sabotaging your business, which is quite a scary thought, really, isn't it? To think that that could possibly be happening. But believe it or not, you may unknowingly be allowing technology to kill your dental business. I'd like to thank Equa Marketing, the leaders in digital marketing for dentists, for sponsoring this water cooler event. So, big question about about technology and how it is impacting on our dental business. Just think to yourself, for those of you out there who are old enough to remember what life was like when cash registers were just cash registers, and we would go to the store and we would pick up a newspaper that was going to cost 10 cents, and we would hand the storekeeper a 10-cent piece or a dime, and they would allow us to walk out with the newspaper. Now we have to scan the newspaper and wait for the computer to recognize, because the computers are doing stock takes as well. And these simple processes that we used to have that were easy to manage are now becoming very, very complicated, because a lot of the is spent on other things apart from the service in the business. And sometimes I wonder in dentistry that we actually have technology being added into the dental business by people who just have just really looked at it and thought, well, I wonder what sort of technology I can invent. So let me tell you a real life scenario that happened to me way back in 2013. In 2013, I started working a couple of days a week in a practice down near my farm. I had two homes, one in Sydney, where I had my main practice, which I'd sold, and I was working 3 days a week there. And I had a farm down 2 hours out of Sydney, and I decided I'd help out a dentist there by doing a little bit of work for him and his wife in their dental practice. And little did I know that technology had invented something new in the dental business that I wasn't using in my practice. And what was happening, I was working away on a patient at this friend's dental practice, and all of a sudden, my dental assistant, who was sitting beside me, just spoke for no reason, and she said these words. She said, "Yeah, next one's here." And I thought, what does that mean? What is happening? Because I was unaware of what was actually happening. And what had actually happened was that she was viewing the operatory computer monitor, which was positioned behind me. I wasn't able to see it. It was positioned behind me, but she was facing that. And she had been able to bring up the appointment schedule on the monitor, whereas I always had the patient's charts on the monitor. And somebody out at the reception in the dental practice had indicated through the appointment schedule that by a change of colour in the appointment book that my next patient had arrived. Now, this is a feature that I did not use in my own dental practice, and one of the reasons I didn't use it was it became I felt that this was a very impersonal way of allowing me to find out that my next patient was here. Firstly, for the patient that I was treating in that treatment room at that time, imagine what they thought. What did they think when the dental nurse just goes, "Yeah, next one's here"? Do you think that they thought that maybe an hour before the dental nurse had said exactly the same thing? She said, yeah, next one's here, and that this person, let's call her Mrs. Brown, was labelled as, yeah, next one. The second thing is, what would the patient in the chair think when she hears this sort of a comment? Would she think that it implies, hurry up, your next one's here, stop dawdling and get finished on this patient, your next one's here? Really, I couldn't see any positive in the announcement of the next dental patient by using technology. I saw no positive in this at all. I saw it as being totally detrimental. Here's what we did in my practice, and here's what we kept doing in my practice when a new patient arrived. So when a new patient, sorry, when the next patient arrived, they were greeted at the dental reception by one of our front office concierges, who would usually beat the greet and would say, oh, good morning, Mrs. Brown. Thanks for arriving early. We love it when our patients come in early. Just let me go down and let Dr. Moffat know that you're here, see if we can get you in a little bit sooner. So that's the greeting that the patient receives. And then the receptionist or the concierge then goes down to the treatment room, walks into the treatment room where I'm a patient and my dental assistant, and she walks in and she says, Dr. Moffat. And then there's just a momentary pause, just so that my mind engages. Is here for her 10 o'clock appointment, and I've thanked her for coming in early. And then I would respond in a couple of different manners. I could say, oh, that's great. I love it when patients come in early. Or it would also be implied to Mrs. Smith, who was in the chair at the time, saying she would hear, oh, they like it. They encourage people to come in early and they like it as well. The other thing that I could do, I could say, oh, Mrs. Brown's here. Oh, fantastic. Oh, Jenny, can you ask Mrs. Brown how her holiday was? Can you ask Mrs. Brown how her dinner party went last week? Can you ask Mrs. Brown how her new granddaughter is going? And we could create a little bit of conversation that patients are more to us than being just teeth and credit cards. That they're actually human beings who come to us for a relationship and they get dentistry done at the same time. Really, really important thing to think about. It's no inconvenience really for the concierge or the dental receptionist to just walk down and verbally announce the arrival of the next patient in a conversational manner so that everybody gets to join in. But more importantly, that the patient in the chair feels like there's not going to be a rush. I'll thank them for coming in early. Let them know that I'm running on time. Let them know that everything's going well and I'll be seeing them on time. A little bit of reassurance, but also for the patient in the chair, that they're not just there as a typodont with their mouth open having their tooth drilled. And I found this really, really important, and I couldn't understand why any dental practice would want to create a buzzer system, a light system, a non-verbal communication system that didn't allow the patient in the chair to feel like they were being represented, that they were actually being acknowledged. Now, let me tell you how this also then pans out with the announcement of the hygiene examination. Because again, I've seen dental practices where the dentist just gets buzzed that it's time for him to go and do a hygiene check, or worse still, the dentist decides that he'll do a hygiene check when it suits him, or suits the dentist, sorry, I'll use him, suits the dentist, as opposed to when it suits the hygiene patient and the hygienist. And again, this is a whole nother presentation away from the technology. The fact that if you really want to maximize your return out of hygiene in terms of using the hygienist for pre-diagnostic examinations, so that the dentist comes in and confirms the findings of the hygienist, so that the hygienist calls the dentist at a specific time every hour on the hour. If you want to do that, then the theatre of the hygienist coming in and actually requesting the dentist to come to them is far more advantageous than the dentist just getting a light flash or a buzzer flash, or the dental assistant just saying, hygiene check, room 5, which is just so impersonal. Now, I know a lot of dentists protest and they say, well, those, the patient that I'm treating for restorative will feel disadvantaged that I've got to go and do a hygiene check. Well, guess what? Twice a year, sometimes 4 times a year, that patient is the patient that's having the hygiene check. So your restorative patients understand that this is what has to happen from time to time. And often your restorative patients are welcoming of a small break just to rest up before the completion of their restorative appointment. They're understanding. And if you've got a really good dental assistant, your dental assistant can engage your hygiene patient, in your restorative patient, in conversation, such that the restorative patient doesn't even mind the small intermission while you go and do your hygiene check. So again, there's conversational familiarity that occurs when you do verbal handovers as opposed to technological handovers and requests. So the hygienist would come in my instance, and I had a very punctual hygienist who you could set your clock by. 20 minutes before the hour, she was in my room, and she would stand in a certain position such that I would see her feet and feel her presence beside me without her having to speak until she was in that position. Because again, her visual presence alerted me that she was going to become vocally present, as opposed to temporary hygienists who would just call out from the door, the check up when you're ready, which is a very poor way of doing what I'm just about to explain to you. The hygienist would walk in and she'd stand there and I'd say, oh, hello, Stacey. She goes, good morning, Dr. Moffat. Good morning, Mrs. Brown. I put in the chair, who she knows because she treats her for hygiene. Dr. Moffat, I have Mrs. Smith in the chair. She's back for her routine 6-month hygiene appointment. There's 1 or 2 things that I need you to look at. And I'd say, oh, ask Mrs. Smith how her daughter's graduation went. Ask Mrs. Smith how her holiday was. Well, and Stacey might say, well, actually, Mrs. Smith's brought some photos. She wants you to have a look at them. Again, it becomes a conversational exchange and it brings everybody into it, as opposed to patients just feeling like, I'm on a production line. Lastly, I want to tell you how technology is absolutely destroying your appointment schedule. I saw this at a specialist prosthodontist dental practice where I was sitting out the front with the receptionist and the patient was brought out by the dental assistant who would just say, we need 60-minute appointment for a crown on the 1-6. For my American friends, that's tooth number 3. But that's all that was said. And then the dental assistant would leave and the dental receptionist would say, look, I'll just wait for it to come through on the computer what was done today. Again, the lack of personal, vocal, voice handover created a state of confusion for the patient. In my practice, the dental assistant would have already received a handover from the dentist as to what was done, what the patient's going to feel, what's going to be done next time, when that needs to be done by, what will happen if we don't do it in the time frame suggested. You got those 5 things? What was done today? What is the patient going to feel after today? What are we going to do next time? When do we need to do that by? And what will happen if we don't do it in the time frame that we recognize? 5 things. Now you can see in that abbreviated handover of the prosthodontist what was done, what the patient will feel, they weren't covered. What we need the next appointment for was no time frame, no urgency or fear of failure if it isn't done and completed in the appropriate amount of time. And yet a verbal handover like that will only take maybe an extra 30 to 45 seconds if it's done properly. You can add 5 other things which are more personable afterwards, thanking the patient for their time, thanking them for being a great patient, wishing them good health, an act of secret service, discussing something that they discussed, and an above and beyond moment as well. So you've got 5 other things as well, which a computer just can't do. The computer cannot do those verbal things. And what we found was that with our verbal handovers, especially about scheduling the next appointment and creating that certainty, that clear next step, this is what you had done, this is what you're going to feel, this is what we're going to do next time, this is when we need to do it by, and this is what will happen if you don't get it done in that time frame. If we don't create that clarity, guess what? We create a confused patient, and we allow a confused patient to either leave without an appointment, leave promising to call, but they never do, leave with an appointment that they're not going to keep, leave with an appointment that they're going to cancel, leave with an appointment that they're going to put off. It's only verbal exchanges between people who like each other that creates that certainty. And for those dental practices that I coach that are following this protocol of creating that clear next step for their departing patients, what we find is they have a distinct lowering in the number of cancellations that they're experiencing in their dental practice. And so I often get practices that say to me, well, how do I reduce cancellations? Well, you reduce them by setting up the next appointment in the appropriate manner in the first place. And it can be just the same. Again, we're going to a 4th example now, that online scheduling can also result in increased cancellations. Patients scheduling online, but without any personal follow-up. Now, having an online scheduling facility is very good, but we need to back that up with verbal contact of the patient or subsequent contact of the patient to personalize the process. Now, speaking of online scheduling, I know that the restaurants do it all the time. I know that hotels do it all the time. But wouldn't it be nice if the restaurant was able to recognize that there was a special occasion when you were booking? I'm booking my husband's 60th birthday. I'm booking our 30th wedding anniversary. I'm booking to celebrate my husband's 20th anniversary of working for his employer. He's got a big night on. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have the same touch with our patients? Oh, they're booking for a clean, they're a new patient. What's the reason for the clean? I've got a job interview. Oh, it's been a couple of years and I've got a little bit of bleeding. If we get information like this before the patient comes in so that we're prepared, as opposed to, Well, what would you like me to do for you today? Or not even that. Well, let's open up and let's see what's going on inside there, without even asking them. So sometimes when we look at the technology of things, why the heck can't we just do things verbally? Why the heck can't we? Why can't we engage with the people, treat them like a human being? Because I think if you find that if you start treating people like human beings, you will find that you get more engagement, you build a stronger relationship. And if they believe they have a relationship with you and with your staff members, then guess what? They're going to want to come more. They're going to want to get the treatment done. They're going to trust you. They're going to believe you. And they're going to stay with you. And they're going to refer to you as well. So it's a pretty simple fact that sometimes the use of technology is, in fact, killing your business. In fact, my wife was just on the phone to a dental office in America, and she was talking how she had a reservation with a hotel chain, but she wanted to add another room because her son was coming to stay as well, and so she wanted to book another room. So she just rang the hotel direct, and the hotel said, "Oh, you can't do that. You'll have to go online and make the booking." Hello? They actually had a customer there who actually was on the phone and wanted to make a booking. And the hotel chain said, "No, go away and do it the way that we want you to do it, as opposed to giving that customer what they want, which is a reservation and certainty that they've got the room and possibly a little bit of conversation. I'll see if we can get those to be adjoining rooms." So I don't know if anyone out there has any questions or any examples or any stories to tell on this.
Well, one thing that happened here in the U.S. over the weekend was, it's not dental related, but like Target, their cash registers went down for 2 hours. They were out of business for 2 hours. I can see how that can happen in dental offices. When your software goes down, you can't book appointments.
Oh yeah, and you're absolutely right. That in fact, I remember one of my I had a Saturday dental assistant, and she worked at a practice Monday to Friday across town, and she said, yeah, they didn't know who was coming in. They just had to sit there and wait, because at the end of each day, we would print off paper copies of the appointment schedule, at least for the next day, and those paper copies of the appointment schedule were just sticky taped up onto a cupboard door in the treatment room. And so when the dental receptionist or the concierge comes in to let the dentist know the patient's here, they bring in a yellow highlight pen and they just highlight the name of the patient as well, so that the dentist knows exactly where they're up to. And so we always had that paper copy as a backup. But for the total paperless office, Layla, the quest for paperless can actually be detrimental, can't it?
Yeah, because what you're talking about and thinking about Target this weekend, that could be a disaster for a business.
Well, all they would have had to have done, why couldn't what the cash registers wouldn't function, so therefore that means they can't, because the cash registers run on computer, which are linked to the electronic sales machine, so they can't even manually process credit cards. Wow.
And some of the stores ended up closing for 2 hours while they got the machines back up.
Wow, that would be
very costly.
Disappointing. Yeah. So yeah, that reliance on technology I know a periodontist down here in Sydney who he uses a paper appointment book because he said he likes to see 7 patients an hour, and the computers only divide them up into 4s and 6s in the hours. So he can't get 7 lines, whereas he can write 7 names in a paper book. And so that's quite amusing, isn't it? He's streamlined it that he can get a 7th patient into the hour. He runs on 8.5-minute appointments, not 10-minute appointments.
Technology is beneficial, but we're becoming too reliant on it. Yeah,
well, it's I remember at dental school, I was issuing a patient with some partial dentures, top and bottom, and they were wearing them. And the instructor came to me and he said, these look pretty good in the mouth. He says, all right, let's get them out of the mouth and see how they look on the articulator, the machine that holds them. And I said to him, why are we doing that? And he didn't really have a reason, because the patient's not taking the articulator. The articulator is just a mechanical version of what the patient has, and you can see everything the patient's going to do with them by looking in the patient's mouth. So I just couldn't understand why it was relevant to take it back and put it on a machine when it looked good in the mouth that it was going to be worn in. But that might have cost me a few marks, that comment. That challenge from the floor. Anyway, so yeah, those are real life experiences, and sometimes we do get swept up in the thought of technology being something great for our business. And I know at this point in time, a lot of dentists are moving away from impression materials and moving towards scanners for taking images of patients' mouths. But sometimes the use of the scanner is far more time consuming than the 3 minutes of impression material. But of course, it saves time later on, because you can digitally send the image to the laboratory and then get the product made. And of course, now we've got 3D printers that can make restorations as well. So it's interesting to work out where technology is going and what our uses of technology can be. But certainly, going back to non-computerized paper records of patients is definitely time consuming and also space consuming as well. I don't think we're ever going to go that way. But sometimes even the digitally recording of a patient's restorations and their treatment plan take a lot longer in treatment room than if it was just charted out on a paper chart with a pen and then entered at a later time, so that it didn't hold up the dentist, didn't hold up the treatment room, didn't hold up the patient. And so some dentists do get tied up in making sure that their digital records are correct at the time of doing them, but the patients are delayed and productivity is delayed because the technology monster has to be fed. So some interesting conundrums still in dentistry.
As that is very true.
And that comes back to what I said at the start. You've got a 10-cent newspaper in one hand and a dime in the other hand, and you just want to make an exchange. And they say, oh, no, I've got to scan your paper. But you know what it is. Yeah. I need to scan it. Yeah. And it's all part of stock take at the same time. So very, very interesting. But that lack of communication with the patient in that practice that I was working at. And it was interesting that when I suggested that I would like the front office people to come down and announce to me the next patient, they loved the idea. They actually loved the idea of actually getting up, going down the back, and then coming back and reporting back to the patient. They thought that was great. Whereas when that doesn't happen, when the receptionist just sits there and presses a button on the computer, sometimes that action is actually an inconvenience to what the receptionist has been doing, which may be nothing, which may be something clerical, or maybe something conversational with another person of the office team. And that's also a detrimental action to inspiring confidence and friendliness to the arriving patient as well. So there's a whole list of subtle non-verbal signals that we send by actually behaving non-verbally, and those can be detrimental to the business. And a lot of dentists don't realise this, that they're allowing technology to take the place of conversation and focusing totally on doing their marketing and doing their case presentation. And in the meantime, the patient's arrived and is ignored and sinks into the depths of despair and anxiety while they're waiting, that they may have decided by the time they go down to the treatment room as a new patient, I'm not coming back here. These people don't even care about me. And yet we think, we're so technologically advanced because we were able to press a button and let the dentist know down the back that his next patient was here, as opposed to going down and letting the dentist know that the patient's here, and then coming back and saying, Dr. Moffat said, thanks for arriving early, and it looks like he's running on time and you'll be seen on time. Or it looks like he's running a little bit late. Is that okay? And they go, yeah, that's fine. Tell him to take his time. Again, just engaging with the patient. Sometimes we end up avoiding the patient, and we wonder why we have high cancellation rates. Really crazy. Have you got any more questions, Layla?
No, that was it.
Well, I think if that's the case, then I'd like to thank Equa Marketing, the leaders in digital marketing, for sponsoring this water cooler event. It's been, again, a chance for me to share my wisdom with the dental water cooler population out there. And the date of the next dental water cooler will be in July, and that's the second Monday in July, which is the 8th of July. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm double checking that right now.
Yeah, I've got it here in front of me. So 8th of July, 8 o'clock New York time, Eastern time.